The Profectory Podcast, Mastering the Mind and Market. Hosted by Manny Charan, we explore what it takes to succeed, both in business and within yourself. From strategy and business growth to mindset and resilience, we provide the tools to lead with clarity, confidence, and wisdom. Today, we have a little bit of an atypical guest. Dr. Ricardo Valerdi is a university professor and did also spend time in industry. He is department head. He's got so many accolades, I'd spend 10 minutes just reading them off. But today's conversation has to do with something that he started called the science of sport. Welcome to the show, Ricardo.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, so we've known each other for a number of years, and I kind of remember around the time where you decided to make this a go. So give us a bit of the background, paint us a picture of how that all kind of occurred with the science of sport, and tell us what it is also.
Absolutely. Science of Sport is a nonprofit dedicated to inspiring kids to look at STEM in a more interesting and interactive way through sports. So we bring math and science to life through sports is our tagline. I would probably need to rewind back to when I lived in Boston, and I was a big Red Sox fan. When I moved there initially about 20 years ago, they had just broken the curse of the Bambino. So if you're familiar with baseball lore, that's when the Red Sox had gone on a 8-decade drought of not being able to win the World Series.
Right.
And it was credited to the Red Sox making a terrible trade of Babe Ruth from the Red Sox to the Yankees. Greatest player of all time, even at today's standards. And what happened about 20 years ago is the Red Sox finally won a World Series, and they broke one of baseball's curses, which is a massive thing. That's sort of, and Boston is just a big sports town anyway, with the Patriots and the Celtics and the Bruins. So what that really translated to for me is a great example of passionate fan bases,
right,
and what it does in terms of how they see the world. And around that time, the book Moneyball was published.
Right.
And Michael Lewis wrote the story about the Oakland Athletics in the early 2000s and how they were basically more efficient as a business because they were winning as much as the New York Yankees, but at a much lower payroll.
Right.
So it was like this business efficiency of wins per $1 million. And Moneyball was also a great way to tell the story about how baseball is a great way to understand statistics. Mm-hmm. That's what sang to me. So put those two ingredients together, the Red Sox breaking the curse of the Bambino, Moneyball coming out around the same time. And I'm moving to Tucson around that same time as well. And guess what? The University of Arizona baseball team wins the College World Series in 2012.
Perfect storm.
It's just, everything is beautiful. And if you know anything about Major League Baseball and its relationship with the state of Arizona, we host spring training here for half of the teams. So we have the Cactus League here in Arizona. The Citrus League is in Florida. So that also tells you a lot about the interest and the attention that baseball has in a state like Arizona, because you can play it year round. You put all those things together, and me coming at it from an engineering perspective and always looking for ideas on how to relate engineering to the real world, I just thought to myself, wouldn't it be fun to teach kids how to read the back of a baseball card?
Right.
That's it. That's the idea.
That's something that is, as you hear the stats and, especially in baseball and now other sports, now we're seeing like the NFL is making more decisions based on statistics and all of that. Your background is in systems and industrial engineering. And so that's not a typical run-of-the-mill degree from we'll say the big four, the big three: electrical, mechanical, civil, and maybe mining. So tell us what that is all about.
Absolutely. I actually got my undergrad in electrical engineering and worked for a few years for a wireless communications company, Motorola. And interestingly, when I started my job at Motorola, they handed me my box of business cards. And on the business card, it said, right underneath my name, my title was systems engineer. That was very confusing. I didn't know why they had done it. I thought maybe it was a typo. So I went over to my boss and said, hey, can you help me understand why that's my title? I thought I was a wireless communications engineer.
Right.
And he went on to explain about the role that I'm playing in building a solution for a client. In this case, public safety was the market that we were providing solutions for. And the idea was not just to sell them radios or walkie-talkies, but the idea was to sell them solutions. And then I understood what he meant by systems engineer. And of course, then I read some books, took some classes, got a master's degree, got a PhD, and it sort of went on from there. But I quickly understood that if you have a background in almost any engineering field, and then you take that expertise and you apply it to bigger problems, you're already talking about systems right away.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that. I myself am a mechanical engineer. My partner, Adam Hartung, is an electrical engineer, and we're doing this now. We're in the business domain. Okay. So I can draw the line in my head between your that perfect fertile ground you mentioned when you came to Tucson. You had all these things coming together. You wanted to teach kids about how to read up the back of a baseball card. And then you couple that with your problem-solving skills in the systems world, and boom. So give us an idea of how that pen to paper, how it actually happened, how you made the decision, and like, what does that initial piece look like?
The problem I was trying to solve with the Science of Baseball program was to motivate kids who were either told that they weren't good at math, or they were just disinterested because they're tired of hearing, Johnny has 5 apples and Susie has 6 oranges and Peter has, it's like, okay, come on, make it real. Yeah. And there's a middle school right across the street from the University of Arizona, Mansfield Middle School. I'm sure you've driven by it a million times.
Yeah, my kid went there. Yep.
Okay. So you have picked up there many times. And I walked across the street to that middle school, and I talked to the principal, and I asked him whether he could identify middle school students that might be interested in a baseball statistics camp. And he said, absolutely. How many kids can I send? I said, well, how about we just start with 20, just to start small. And okay. I sort of realized, okay, I got to put something together. It's not just going to be about baseball cards anymore, but what else can we use baseball for? Geometry, physics, biomechanics, aerodynamics. I mean, it just goes on and on.
You're right.
And that just caused us to think about what are the various expertise that exist at the University of Arizona. I started calling my friends at the medical school, in the math department, in the physics department, and they helped me put together a camp for these 20 kids in the middle school. And that was back in 2012.
Wow. Yeah. So I can imagine those kids were, their minds were blown away. I mean, illuminated. There's so many things in sport that, being an engineer, I recognize all those things you mentioned. And then you layer on top of that the money side, you layer on top of that the social media, there's a whole thing there. So that was in 2012. We're now in 2014. And what's happening now? What's the line, the progression that got you from there till now?
Yeah, there was this tipping point about 6 months or a year later. Remember I mentioned the U of A baseball team won the College World Series in 2012. That was the same year I did the camp with the middle school. And I invited Coach Andy Lopez to be a speaker at the camp. And I sat in the back of the room. Andy Lopez gave a very inspiring talk about the importance of education and the need to focus on education before you thought about being a college athlete. And I remember the example he gave was, when you're at school, you want to be the best student possible. But when you're inside of the foul lines, you want to be the best baseball player possible. And you see kids, these middle school kids, their light bulbs are going off. And I'm experiencing this too. And I'm looking around and thinking, I think we've got something here. Wow. Baseball can be that vehicle. The Moneyball book is good evidence, but how do we translate this into something actionable? And somebody recommended that we meet with the Arizona Diamondbacks and share with them the idea that we're implementing in Tucson. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, 6 months later, we have a partnership with the Diamondbacks, and they want us to roll out this program statewide. And at that point, I felt like the dog that caught the car. I thought, what have I gotten myself into here? And fast forward to today, we work with over a third of Major League Baseball. We work with NFL teams, NBA teams, Major League Soccer. It's massive. It exploded into a concept that is applicable across multiple sports, across multiple grade levels, and it's gone nationwide.
That's amazing. So who is your end customer? Because in a way, your customer is the student, right? But who's actually engaging with the curriculum? Who's engaging with your team? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I like to think of it as a trio of things that come together. That one leg of that is the schools. They have a need for innovative curriculum. They have a need for improving the math scores or the science scores of their students. The other part of that triangle is the professional baseball teams or professional sports teams. Their interest is in growing their fan base and improving the community and getting their brand out there. And then the third part of that triangle is us. We are the service provider that bring those two worlds together. We provide something that the schools need and want, and we provide something that the professional sports teams see as a really impactful way to serve the community. And the combination of those things, we integrate them into a solution that ultimately serves the student. But to have the three players at the table is what makes the magic happen.
No, I can see that. One of our biggest things we talk about is trends. And, these are big mega trends or meta trends. They're sometimes called things like AI, the gig economy, demographics, climate change. And among those, maybe not the top 6, but maybe the upper 50, you have the idea of esports and how they're taking off and how they're challenging and giving the traditional sports domain a run for the money. So how do you see what you're doing impacting that framework?
We've thought about that a lot. And there actually happens to be a very clean connection between what we do, which is the traditional after-school sports program or the Little League or the Rec League and esports. And the two connections are Madden and NBA 2K. If you think about it, those are not the most popular video games, but they do have tournaments. They do have a huge following. And you can think about the connection, very clear connection between understanding the science of football and then competing in a Madden football game. or
Right.
Madden football esports tournament. You can think about the probability and all the statistical interesting dimensions of basketball, and then playing NBA 2K. And I think those two are probably the most logical connections. Even beyond that, though, take any other game. Like I see my kids play, Fortnite, for
Right.
instance. And there's a ton of statistics in Fortnite. There's a ton of strategy. There's a ton of things to measure, a lot of things to understand, that I think you could probably create a similar curriculum around Fortnite if you wanted to.
Interesting. Now, you're obviously a professor, a distinguished professor at the University of Arizona. And you sort of invented this under that umbrella to some degree, right? So is this university property, or, I know Tech Launch Arizona because I used to be on the board. So I know that there's that. What's the relationship between Science of Sport, Tech Launch Arizona, and we'll say the world at large?
One of the advantages of being a faculty member at a research university is there are units like Tech Launch that help you commercialize your idea. So shortly after we formed the partnership with Arizona Diamondbacks a decade ago, I went to David Allen, who was the director of Tech Launch at the time, and I said, hey, David, I have this idea to form a company to provide educational services to school districts around the country around this concept of STEM and sports. And David kind of looked at me funny. He said, did you say nonprofit? Yeah. Interesting. Do you have a patent or a trade secret? No, we don't. So it wasn't a traditional invention out of a laboratory in the
Right.
College of Engineering. It was a service, and it was a curriculum. And so we figured out, with David's help, how to structure the curriculum in a way that it could be considered intellectual property. And since it was developed by me at the University of Arizona, the IP for the Science of Baseball curriculum is actually owned by U of A.
Okay. Now, does that give you advantages or disadvantages, or what does that do for your outreach?
I think it's a huge advantage because it gives credibility out of the gate. It's affiliated with an educational institution. The U of A has a brand, not only in baseball, but in other sports. But it also gave me access to the alumni network.
Mm.
And,
Yep.
and let me tell you a quick example of that, which
Sure.
is the very next customer after the Arizona Diamondbacks was the Anaheim Angels. And the reason that relationship was created is because the owner and the president of the team are University of Arizona alums.
Right.
Artie Moreno, Dennis Kuhl. I contacted them about what I was doing in Arizona, and immediately they said, let's do this in Anaheim. Rock and roll, bear down, let's go.
Nice. Yeah, I can see that. And Ricardo, I know you, and you're not gonna just wait or kind of just status quo this thing. So what's happening? What are you working on that we can look forward to down the road? And how does that look with everything happening in the world? Obviously sports have their own kind of world, but mentioned earlier the slight decline in some ways of some of the sports, the exponential increase in esports. You have this whole framework happening, and you have, I know you're not just going to settle for, give me more of the same. What's happening that's different?
If you're familiar with Simon Sinek's Start With Why.
Yep.
I've continuously been asking myself that question. Why would we want to educate people to be better data scientists or sports analysts? And I think the answer to that question is because we want them to make better decisions. And we want to promote numeracy, which is the analog to literacy. Numeracy is the ability to make decisions with data. So let's unpack that a little bit. Ultimately, my goal as an educator and as an engineer is to help young minds be better at making decisions, then where that put me, Manny, was I need to write a book about decision making.
Okay.
And that's what I'm working on now.
Oh, so yeah, that's a perfect segue. I was gonna shift gears slightly away from what your involvement in the science of sport, and kind of talk about your research. And let's start off with that. Tell us a little bit more about that book, because it sounds very interesting. Especially, by the way, under the backdrop of all this AI stuff happening.
Yeah, that's right. And what's interesting is my experience in sports analytics and in using sports as a way to educate has heavily influenced how this book is structured. And I'll tell you the most obvious connection. In baseball, there's this thing called the 5-tool player. And every high school, college, minor league, pro player gets evaluated on 5 tools, which is hitting for average, hitting for power, running, fielding, and throwing. Okay? And so there's this whole scorecard that's used for each of those 5 dimensions. And I thought to myself, I wonder if in decision making or decision makers have 5 tools that they need to be good at as well. And that's kind of where I landed. With the book, I identified 5 tools that are important for decision makers, heavily influenced by baseball, of course, but then it departs from sports and it talks about how are these tools how are they derived from important decisions that are made in business, in the military, in education, in sports. And ultimately what I landed on for the book working title, is The 5 Tools for Great Decision Makers.
Wow. So you're saying that these are they could be used in any domain, business, everyday life, or is it more targeted towards a particular domain?
They can be broadly applicable to what am I going to make for dinner tonight, to should I take this job offer that's in front of me, to should I make or buy a certain solution. They are very broadly applicable. Decision making is everywhere.
Do you so there's a lot of things out there right now. Some words are they call them hacking, like when Tim Ferriss came out with the 4-hour work week. There's Atomic Habits. There's the work up at the other Arizona school by a guy named Dr. Cialdini, Influence. So there's all these tools that are actually culminating, right? Do you see this book as one of those tools as well?
Absolutely. And you can already tell that my wish was to make the concepts from the book very accessible. So I almost imagined like I was writing to a elementary or middle school audience, so that it was crystal clear what needed to be done to be a good decision maker or great decision maker. And my hope is that people who read books about decision making, I mean, there's the classic Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman, the former Nobel laureate in economics. That's, I think, the number 1 seller in the decision making category. So my wish is people who read that book, they would want to read my book next, because it gives them some tangible advice and some stories from sports. And sports is a great teacher for decision making, because you know very quickly whether you're doing well or not. And that's my wish, is that if you have Thinking Fast and Slow on your bookshelf, that 5 Tools for Great Decision Makers will be right next to it.
And were these tools you came up with, obviously your academic and your commercial background both are part of this, your sports background. Are these particular tools derived from looking at case studies of people making decisions, or is it derived from the ground up, or from divination and crystal ball? Like, where'd you come up with these 5?
Yeah, so I had to ignore everything I learned about writing academic papers and technical manuals and everything that engineers do. I had to kind of put that aside, and I had to learn how to approach, because I want this to be a broadly, applicable book. So I'm not saying that you're going to see it at an airport bookstore, but like it's kind of that's kind of the goal, for it to be of that type of business book. And so the idea was to write stories. And there were so many great stories about sports, from college sports to pro sports, that are really good teachers about decision making. So it was more like, tell a story about an event that occurred, describe how it played out, and reflect on what is the crucial element that was a key part of making that decision.
Okay. And you don't have to answer this because I know you're in the middle of writing the book. Can you enumerate the 5 so we have an idea of what the framework looks like?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm sure I can remember because I've been looking at it so much recently. So I actually came up with a acronym, FLASH, FLASH. The F, the first tool is F, which is first ask questions. And that involves figuring out, well, what is the decision that needs to be made? Who's making the decision? What kind of data do we have to support the analysis? How are we going to analyze that data to support the decision? So on. You can think of many, many questions that would be necessary to begin to understand what is in and out of scope. The L in FLASH is look at the data. And I talk about all sorts of techniques that help with not just slicing data and aggregating data, but also the statistical tests that tell you one thing or might tell you another. There's a lot of really cool examples from baseball, actually, that point to potential mistakes or biases that can be made along the way. Yeah. The A, the third tool, is analyze the consequences. So think of unintended consequences, think of intended consequences, think of second order effects, the sort of gaming simulation that you need to do to understand what the implication of your decision is. The S, the fourth tool, is scrutinize the options. So you can think of all sorts of sort of techniques like being devil's advocate, or try to figure out why you might be wrong, and looking at things from different perspectives to stress test the decision. And finally, the H in FLASH is humanize it. And the best way to describe that is remembering that in the world of artificial intelligence, those are decision aids, but at the end of the day, it's human beings leveraging AI to make decisions. The AI is not going to make the decision for us, but it's knowing how to leverage the power of AI to support a decision.
Wow. Those are very compelling. I think the FLASH acronym really brings it home. And, we talk a lot, another one of the things we talk about is bias, and how bias is really just super important to understand that it's there, figure out ways to mitigate it. So I'm really excited to get a hold of your book. When's it going to come out? Do you have an idea?
I hope that next year it will come out. I've written about 3/4 of it. And hopefully you'll invite me back to the podcast once the book is published. and we could talk about the stories and talk about the experience of talking to people about how Flash applies to their industry or their problem area.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to have you back. I think the idea is trends, bias, scenario planning. Some of these are the tenets that we talk about. And a lot of that is data driven. There's this big idea of follow your gut and your, gut this, gut that. And there's nothing wrong with that to some degree. But if you have data in front of you, why not follow the data? And, there's many decisions I've made where I've gone against my gut, and I'm glad I have, because I was leveraging data. And there's other times when I have actually just leveraged my gut. So appreciate the opportunity, Ricardo. Any final thoughts? Actually, I have one more question. I almost forgot. If you were to have a magic telephone and you could call yourself when you were 24, 23 years old and tell yourself some bit of advice about the next 25, whatever years, what would that be?
I would probably tell myself to relax a little bit about career planning and what the future looks like, because what's more important is crushing the current thing that you're working on, keeping the main thing, because people are watching. They're observing what you're doing, how you're navigating the problem, how you're solving the problem, how you're interacting with people. And that's so much more important than worrying about where do you want to be in 5 years. That exercise is interesting, but it's not critical. It's not the most important thing. So my message to myself would be relax, focus on the main thing, do it well, and that's going to open doors.
Wow, that's really good advice. Good advice. I know we have kids about the same age, and I'll definitely let them know that those are very, very good words. Thanks again for your time, Ricardo. We'll have you back when you get your book out. And with that, make it a great rest of the year. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.